It is Wednesday, the 3rd of October. Good evening. My name is Michelle Ngele Odhiambo. Thank you for joining us on The Big Story. Tonight, more than 500 maize farmers got to bed a dejected lot for the second day running after Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mwangi Kiunjuri failed to keep his promise. The CS on Sunday promised all farmers who supplied maize to the National Cereals and Produce Board would be paid starting Tuesday, and the process finalized on Friday this week. But 2 days after the day payments were supposed to begin, we have not come across a single farmer who has been paid his dues. Important to note is the poor farmers who have been waiting for the payments for the last 9 months. The Agriculture CS says the delay was occasioned by an audit to weed out criminals who had infiltrated the maize supply chain. Well, tonight we ask why the delay in paying maize farmers again, even after a thorough audit.
We were not able to pay our farmers in good time because the maize that was brought to National Cereals and Produce Board exceeded the amount of money budgeted. And therefore, it was a must for the government to go through a budget system and then do allocations for us to be able to pay our farmers. That was done, and by last week, we already had money to pay the farmers. However, the board was not complete, which we were able to do this week, and therefore the board is now in place. And from Tuesday next week, all the farmers who will not be paid before, we expect them to be paid from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so that by the end of next week, all those farmers will have been paid. There are some of them who are still under investigation, about 25%. Again, we expect that by the end of next week, we shall have been able to clear all those cases, and therefore next week, but one, we shall now be making our final payments.
I'll be speaking to a director of the Kenya Farmers Association, Kipkorir Arap Menjo, who is joining us live from our studios in Eldoret. I shall also be speaking to Soy Member of Parliament, Caleb Kositany. But as usual, before we hear from them, let me bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, with more insights on the matter. Sophia, good evening to you. Initially, Agriculture CS Mwangi Kiunjuri had mentioned that the delay was because of a verification exercise to weed out unscrupulous farmers who had infiltrated the maize supply chain. How many farmers then, as of now, are we talking about that have not been paid?
Good evening, Michelle. Indeed, it's about 1,000 farmers that are in question as far as the payments are concerned. I just managed to speak to the CS Agriculture a few moments ago. We had been trying to reach him, but he was holed up in meetings. However, just a few moments ago, we spoke and he talked about 988 being the number of farmers that are yet to be paid. But he said those payments have been made today, so perhaps by tomorrow we'll start seeing the same reflect in their accounts. We'll be tracking and monitoring this with various farmers to see if in fact it's the case. However, again, the reason for the delays is what they've been talking about, verification, because you remember there was an issue of those unscrupulous individuals that were paid. And in fact, as we speak now, the PS Agriculture, several officials from NCPB, including the ex-MD, have been charged with abuse of office that in excess of 6 billion shillings was paid to individuals, or excess of the budget that had been set apart. And remember, these farmers are set to be paid 3.5 billion shillings. The money that has been released now by Treasury, according to Eugene Wamalwa, CS devolution, is 1.4 billion shillings. So still not the entire amount we'll be seeing go out to the farmers. But let's talk a little bit more about this with the leader of majority in the Senate, who was in Uasin Gishu County last week with other senators and got to hear firsthand the frustration, the anger and anguish and suffering of these farmers. And Senator, thank you for making time for us, because many have been wondering, what is the holdup? And you got to hear from the farmers. They addressed you and your fellow senators. I remember one actually saying, Murkomen, you're good in talking and addressing matters. Why aren't you addressing this particular one? Why has this drawn out for so long, since October last year, over a year now?
Yeah. First of all, Sophie, I want to say this is a subject that I have personal interest because, like most of the farmers, I have not been paid, and many of my neighbors have not been paid at home. And it's worst when it comes to the small-scale farmers. What the problem you have at the moment is that you have a whole lot of about over 500 farmers who are small-scale. And the ones who supplied a huge amount of maize were already paid. Now, you have so many of the farmers who are supposed to be paid 1,500,000, 300,000, and so forth, who have not been paid up to now. When people talk about, because I even addressed the farmers in Eldoret, when people talk about we haven't been loud in conversation about the maize issue, it is true we haven't been on media or public there, but this is a subject that we have followed so closely for many years. And the problem we have in the maize sector is systemic. Systemic is that it depends on, seasons, in terms of who is in office that time, who is the cabinet secretary, what is the short-term government policy for that period of time. What has been happening is that the growth in terms of maize production has been going up. The subsidies by government for the fertilizer and the seeds has necessitated more people to go into planting maize, and the produce also getting better. But the problem is that you have the side of receiving the maize themselves in terms of the NCPB. The NCPB now has become an old wineskin holding new wine. You have new set of farmers. You have a new system of government called devolved system of government. I sat in the task force on devolved government. When people talk about even this issue, I was the chair of devolution committee in last term when I actually presented a report which was approved by Senate to transfer the storage, the equivalent of the collection points for maize and cereals to the county governments. But what's happening is that we still have the old structures of NCBB, which are controlled from the center. The local government doesn't have a role, which is the county government, the MCAs, the leaders at the local level. Now, my problem is that we have this short-term problem of lack of payment for the last 1 year, and it's very, very sad. But there's even a worse problem. There's an overlap. The maize have already been harvested. Even now, if you go to Narok, if you hear the story that came from Narok this morning, is that most of the farmers are already saying our maize are not being received. First harvest are going to take place in Uasin Gishu, Trans Nzoia, Elgeyo Marakwet, and Nandi in another 1 month. And you have another problem also, which is worse. The NCBB itself has stored maize for too long. We are told that there is a risk of 8 billion worth of maize inside NCBB, which have not been released. Yeah. Now, they're supposed to receive new maize. They haven't released the other maize that is there. And all this story is also interlinked with the manner in which management is done. Okay. Now, you have our war against corruption. Fantastic. It's a good thing. But you see also, it has scared decision-making at NCBB and the Ministry of Agriculture. I remember when the Senate summoned the Cabinet Secretary, and the Cabinet Secretary said that I can't pay until the EACC approves that we pay. And now, even the Minister is away because the PS was going to be charged, is being charged because of the payments not following the strategic grain reserve and so forth. So we have now a whole centralized system of government that is holding on to a function that is largely devolved. And that's why in the Senate, we told ourselves, it is good to make noises, we are legislators, but what is that we can change for a long period of time? Number one, we have agreed that we must change the law at the NCBB Act so that counties now, by law, are mandated to establish centers for collection of maize, and that NCBB just comes in for the final delivery. Number two, we have also agreed in the Senate that we are going to ensure that the payment structure for the maize will be time-bound. You submit your maize within 30 or 60 days, because we'll agree when the bill comes to the floor of the House, you will have been paid. And then, again, there is a worst part of it, setting the price. Already there is a debate about the price of the maize that is in the field now. Already the last maize we bought at 3,200. Now, if anything comes below that, you know the expectations that farmers have. Yet they receive also subsidies from government. So this conversation is not just a simple issue. We are proposing in the Senate that after we finish our report, we need to have a honest national conversation in agriculture, and we need to relook at all the policy framework of government in agriculture.
So let me put this to you, because you say, and I've heard others say, by virtue of the PS as well as the officials from NCPB being charged in court, that has slowed down even further the processes.
Absolutely.
And yet it shouldn't be about individuals. Yeah. Systems should in place so that if today you're not senator, in your county, Elgeyo Marakwet, it cannot be that events and activities there are stopped. But to put this to you, it's the farmers, the small farmers, quote unquote, if you like, who have not been paid, because payments were made.
Yeah, that's true.
So what is it, how is it that they have, in a sense, been discriminated against? Because 11 billion shillings has been paid out to other farmers.
That's true. That is very true. The preliminary findings in our committee of the special committee that's chaired by Professor Kamara and Senator Wetangula is already showing that some of the people who are called farmers, they are not even known in Bungoma, for example, where the report I've just seen, I perused what they received from the NCBB, but also from the views on the ground. You will find so-and-so has supplied 1,000 or 2,000 bags of maize, but that so-and-so does not farm in that area. Again, the question we're asking ourselves, was there laxity in NCBB? Yes. That's why many people are out. They're going to be charged because, most of this money, there's no... You see, people must know there's no problem trading with maize. But there's a problem taking public money, public taxpayers' money, that is meant to subsidize local farmers and then paying either imported maize or maize that have already been bought from the farmers, which means you have exploited the farmers by giving them maybe 2,000 and bring it to NCBB with 1,200. Now, the question we are going to ask ourselves, and the courts are also going to look at this matter when they're dealing with the people who have been tried. What is the policy framework and the legal framework existing at the moment? Is it strong enough to protect the farmers from this money that has been subsidized? Because initially it used to be, 1 billion, it was a small issue. Now we're talking about 11 billion, and we still have a shortage of 3.5 billion. If they pay today, like the minister said, they're going to pay 1.4. The information I had is that they're going to pay 1.4. But there will still be a shortage of 2.1 billion shillings. Although it goes to farmers who are supposed to earn over 3 million and above, it's still important to emphasize that every farmer, and I want to emphasize this, in Europe, in US, all over the world, including in the WTO system and agreements, farm subsidies and subsidizing farmers for protection of national security and food security is allowed. And farmers must be protected, whether they're small scale or that farmer produces 100,000 acres, bags of maize. All of them deserve equal protection because their role is not profit-making per se. For the nation, their role is food security and making the country independent from external food.
So let me ask you this, because another issue of concern is as far as the payments are concerned, the ping pong from the Ministry of Agriculture to pay the farmers, it's thrown to the Ministry of Devolution to pay the farmers. Then last week, the Minister of Devolution comes back and says it's now back to the Ministry of Agriculture. I mean, there's a problem there, isn't it?
We are proposing in our committee in the Senate that we want to make the NCBB or the institution that will finally fashion in the manner in which we will do to become an independent entity. And to a great extent, have an independent board. The board should be composed of persons who will be interviewed, not just picked the way you want to pick them. And then once they sit in that board, we give them full powers of an accounting officer, the CEO, full powers of accounting officer, and if possible, and that's our proposal, they receive directly budget from the Treasury and Parliament when budgeting, that it goes straight to that institution so that matters accountability, you don't need to come back to the PS, the minister, or you're worried about which ministry. It doesn't matter where they will be put. The decision-making shall be expedited by virtue of having an institution that is accountable and also directly receive the resources.
What was the back and forth about the
It
ministry?
was about the ministry, first of all, it's about who has which authority. Strategic grain reserves is in a special program. You have NCBB still being in agriculture. You have a minister, and I think also that is where clear demarcation of roles should have been done. You have an overlapping mandate. But even more importantly, by the way, because we've spoken in confidence to these public officers, everybody, after they charged the first group of NCBB workers, and when they went even for the PS, after, I don't know, I am not here to make his case, but apparently because cabinet agreed that farmers must be paid, and the PS was under pressure to expeditiously make the payment. Now, when the PS was charged for flouting procedure, not for misusing the money, for flouting procedure, everybody else did not want to go there. In fact, some public officers were saying it's better to be sacked than to move this process faster, because we are told the reason why even this payment was not done by last week is because the strategic grain reserves did not have the money, the board. So when the board was gazetted and appointed, now, because the PS, remember the PS was charged for doing it without the board making a decision. Yes. Now, the board has been put in place. So why should the farmer suffer when you have an institution called government? And I personally say that when EACC, DCI, and these investigation institutions are dealing with these issues, they must ensure that as they deal with all these problems we have, we do not inhibit the most important sectors, including agriculture, to ensure that people are protected from farmers. If you saw those farmers in Eldoret or any part of the country complaining, and especially the ones I have known for as early as January this year, when they were waiting for final to be paid, if you see them complaining, they don't know. This story, these lots of English about, there is EACC, who is the minister, who is not the minister, who is to blame, who is not the board. Those things must be straightened. In fact, the other thing that I forgot to say is that we want also registration of farmers, to be devolved, to become a function of county government. Because if agriculture is devolved, let the registration and identification of who is a farmer in the local level be registered, put in a database. Let's make the decision that in this coming period, all maize will be collected, payment will be made promptly, fertilizer will be provided in the right prices in good time, and the seeds, and therefore, coming next year, we should not have this debate, and we hope that we can provide solutions that are permanent.
Okay, finally and very briefly, agriculture, the backbone of Kenya's economy, and yet time and again we keep hearing whether it's influx. We had a glut of maize last year. There was a subsidy around the electioneering period. Prices came down. Then all of this importation, a glut, then prices went up. Now we're trying to at least get them to 75 from what the CS said. There's a sugar issue. Would you admit that the government, in as far as dealing with such an important sector, has failed? It's farmers, most importantly, that are down at the basic level, but also Kenyans in as far as food security is concerned.
I totally admit that there is chaos. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The sugar sector is complaining. Coffee is dead. Coffee is now being revived. The other day, the government put 1 billion to subsidize coffee fertilizer. Already, I think we are using over 3 or 4, 5 billion. It's 6 billion to subsidize maize, fertilizer, and so forth. But these things are done ad hoc. A complaint comes from farmers, there's some noise, and then the president stands, and then the ministry, and they say, okay, 1 billion to coffee. Then tomorrow we have problem with sugar. I think as a nation, if we really believe that agriculture is the backbone for this country, for both food security, but also in terms of spurring growth, we must have a national conference on agriculture with a new national policy on agriculture. And I can tell you for sure, there's a complaint even why would you want to keep a huge budget in the Ministry of Agriculture at national level, yet agriculture is a devolved function. And what is the role of counties? What we call in law identification and division of responsibilities under Schedule 4 of the Constitution. We must ensure that resources will follow functions.
Correct.
And the functions, if counties, let blame for failure of agriculture be localized, so that when this noise you'll be hearing about this and that, you would see people complaining to their governor and the MCA and find local solutions. Let national government focus on the policy and looking for market. And then the local level, we devolve the problems and the solutions related to agriculture to the local level.
All right. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Elgeyo Marakwet, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, he's also leader of majority in the Senate, giving us his stake on this. So, Michelle, I'll hand it back to you as you continue the conversation.
Many thanks. That is our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna. Then earlier today, members of parliament from the maize growing regions protested the delay in paying the farmers, accusing the NCPB of double standards. They say people who imported and supplied maize to NCPB are paid without delays, unlike farmers who've had to wait for more than 9 months and counting. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
It is very wrong. It is very immoral, and we, as members of parliament, we are urging the government to move with speed because we mean it. We are serious. If by Monday next week, farmers will still be waiting for their payment, we will organize a major demonstration across the country.
But I also want to advise the head of state, that is the president, that he has taken these issues of farmers very lightly. Farmers have been complaining. We had a very tough meeting the other day when senators came to us in Gishu, and farmers were not happy, and their next course of action is going to be very bad. So I would also want to advise the president that let him take these issues of farmers very, very seriously, because where we are heading, it is disaster. Why I'm saying that is that farmers already have a crop that is ready for this year, and there is no budget to buy the maize. What we are using, I think we are using the money for the last financial, the money we are using to pay last year's maize is the 1.4 million, which is supposed to be for strategic reserve.
Well, let me bring in the director of the Kenya Farmers Association, Kipkorir Arap Menjo, joining us live from our studios in Eldoret. Many thanks for joining us on the big story tonight. Cabinet Secretary Treasury Henry Rotich, as well as his agriculture counterpart Mwangi Kiunjuri, committed on national television that farmers who delivered the produce to NCPB would be paid as of Monday this week. 2 days later, not a single shilling has hit the account of any farmer from the region. What does the Kenya Farmers Association make of this?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. You know, one, as a cabinet secretary, I expect that the CS Agriculture and CS Treasury to have met together and discuss when they were going to make these payments. But you see, the CS Treasury promised to pay payments on Monday. CS Agriculture met his promise for Tuesday. So that shows there is a disconnect between the two. And they are serving the same government. So this is something which is unheard of. Because if they are serving the same government, same policies, same agenda, they should have really consulted each other. And even before announcing that it's going to be Monday, factor in maybe the period they have to take in transacting this kind of money. But now, time has gone, and the day they promised, they have not been able to pay, and you can imagine how the farmers were disappointed. So that is not in order, because most of them were asking me if we can be cheated by our own ministers, then whom do we trust? Because imagine, Michelle, there are some farmers who came with people who owed them some money, only to be told that there's no money, and already they were having high expectations. So that is not right. Two, they are aware of the farmers' needs, and they have promised that they are going to pay 1.4. And you know the total amount, the total amount is 3.5. So, which means all the farmers are having high hopes that they'll be paid. And you know the amount is not sufficient.
Right,
so
right.
Up with that delay, I was expecting the minister to have really worked extra mile to ensure that they settle the whole amount so that they're able to rest this kind of problem which farmers are facing. And it is really disturbing because as they promise that agriculture, as they always say, agriculture is the backbone of our economy, and the way the farmers are frustrated, then you really wonder. It is not a question of policies. The policies are there in place. Kenya is a signatory of Maputo Declaration of 2003. We are also a signatory to Maputo, Melapo Protocol, which reaffirms that agriculture should always be given at least 10% of the national budget. And so far, we are doing about 3%. You can see how agriculture is treated.
All right, so the 1.4 billion shillings really there, you rightly mentioned, only covers about 61% of the total sum. That is 3.5 billion shillings. What next course of action will the farmers take then if the government continues to delay past Thursday this week?
No, we are going to have a meeting tomorrow, and where we have to discuss, because you see, there's something which is really a weighty matter, so we cannot really decide. A few people cannot just decide. We are going to discuss so that we weigh together what are the options available. Because you can imagine, if the government has promised this kind of money, and they have already paid out, you can imagine they have paid out 8 billion, and the people who took this huge amount have not been mentioned. But they are saying that the 3.5 owed to farmers is where now they are insisting on vetting, revetting. But you see, this is just like closing the stable when the horse are spalded. You cannot really subject to this small group to this kind of vetting. And they know very well that they are not the ones really who went away with the huge amount, because the cartels went with the big money. The small money is just meant for the small farmers. And I think that is it. They need to really come out and sort out these farmers, allow them to rest and sort out. Because now, Michelle, there's a major problem which we are facing now. And I think Senator Murkomen mentioned. The incoming crop for the year is ready. The farmers are still holding about 400 to 500 bags of last year's crop. Now, all these cereals is full of maize from outside and also maize from within. And the minister has reduced the price, the market price of 2 packets kg to 75 shillings. In effect, what does that mean? The market price for cereals now is going to go down. And the millers will protect their interest. Anybody else, the transporters, will protect their interest in between. But the loser here is the farmer. So I'm very worried. Come in the next couple of months, the price of 1 pack of maize will be cheaper than the cost of a cock during Christmas season.
Right.
Just imagine that scenario.
Well, let me bring in...
This is where we're headed to.
All right, let me bring in a Soy Member of Parliament, Caleb Kositany. The disillusionment of farmers, they're still holding on to about 500,000 bags of maize from last season's crop. They're very disappointed by failed promises from the government, CS Treasury, CS Agriculture. Why this seemingly PR stunt, making a promise to farmers on national television and failing to meet the same promise?
Well, I think we have a big problem with how people in government perceive farming. They take farming like it's just any other Tom, Dick, and Harry's job. Farming is a business, and we want it to be seen that way by officials in government. The biggest problem that I've seen of late, and with these payments to the farmers, is that at the moment when we thought the farmers were going to be paid, we are told that there was a circular from the head of public service that he had moved the strategic gain reserve, which purchases maize or grain on behalf of government to the Ministry of Devolution. For whatever reasons, I don't know. And at the moment when they finished, then we had the vetting process was going on. At the moment when the Ministry of Devolution was ready to pay, we are told again the functions have been moved back to the Agricultural Ministry. So it really becomes a big problem to the farmer. And we actually at one point were contemplating asking the head of public service to resign because he doesn't seem to have known or to know his job well. And I think going forward, we need to legislate, as had been said by the majority leader of the Senate. We are going to legislate in Parliament and Senate in order that going forward we have proper laws to guide the farmer in terms of delivery of maize to cereals board.
All right, well, there is already an ad hoc, the Senate ad hoc committee on agriculture, and they had been speaking to agriculture executives earlier this week, and part of the recommendations that came from that meeting was to devolve the functions of the National Cereals and Produce Board. And the argument here was that the NCPB depots are located within the county governments, but these same county governments do not know how to run or even determine how these NCPB depots are operated. Would it be a good idea to then devolve the same function?
I think if we devolve the said functions and with the resources that are required to support the functions of devolving the units, our county government, especially I speak for Uasin Gishu, Nandi, and the agricultural areas, the maize producing areas, will be able to handle the functions because we are all basically farmers and we know our needs. We know that farming is a time-based operation business. So we really, I think if we're devolving the system would be good. But going forward also, Michelle, I have also a bill in Parliament that is already being printed and we're going to be looking at it soon, whereby we also want to have timelines in terms of if a farmer delivers his maize, credit in any other business is 30 days, 60 days or 90 days, but for a farmer it should be 30 days. Once you have delivered your maize to the cereals board, you should be paid within 30 days, failure to which you are allowed to charge interest based on the bank, whether you borrowed from bank or whether you borrowed from the Agricultural Finance Corporation. Because what we saw recently and what is really happening now is farmers have not been paid for the last 9 months. They are receiving demand letters from banks and from Agricultural Finance Corporation, which is another government entity, asking farmers, you have not serviced your loan, we will not give you credit next year. Yet they know clearly that the farmer is awaiting payment from the NCPB. So we are going to enact a law whereby once a farmer delivers his maize, he charges the cereals board interest, so that that will then prompt government and treasury to provide funds promptly, so that farmers are paid upon delivery of their maize.
All right, so Member of Parliament Caleb Kositanyi there. Also in studio is the director of the Kenya Farmers Association, Kipkorir Menjo. When we come back, we'll be discussing other measures to cushion maize farmers in the country with the current prices of maize in the country. This is The Big Story. Do stay with us. The conversation continues in just a moment.